Lando Norris finally managed to start a race in front of his title rival and teammate Oscar Piastri, and still he didn't win. The car he had underneath him is a dominant beast that put 37 seconds on George Russell in P3. After the race, Pando Porras did what he's done so often. He yapped about Max Verstappen again. Let's go through all the awkward, passive-aggressive interviews he did and what the general opinion is about them. I'm Wimbo. Here's 3 seconds to leave a like. Max Verstappen managed to squeeze his RB21 onto pole position. And as a Max fan, I was hopeful he'd cruise to victory in free air. Unfortunately, as it turned out, the McLaren package was way too strong. Verstappen had a good start, but he locked up a little in turn 2. Norris had been looking closely at Piastri destroying drivers in front of him after the start, so he thought he could manage to overtake Max around the outside. Verstappen was ahead and had a little wobble on his cold tyres, which made Norris jump, and he went off track, making him lose 4 positions. Not a smart move from the number 2 in the standings, especially seeing how fast the MCL39 was. But maybe Norris didn't know that yet. You can't look into the future, right? So we had the usual crying over the radio about how unfair it was. You know the drill. No further investigation. After a period of a virtual safety car, because Liam Lawson got launched by the Alpine of Jack Doohan and the other Australian on the grid's car needed to be picked up, the cars were on their way again. And Piastri was on Max's tail, biding his time, applying pressure to get through. Further back, Norris was passing cars and he was P3 very quickly. Max Verstappen was defending like a lion until he defended the inside, hit the brakes very late and locked up. This was the moment the Australian leader in the championship was waiting for, and he passed Verstappen. Well played, sir. Then it was Lando Norris' turn to shine, but for some reason it always looks clunky as hell when he fights Max Verstappen. He managed to get past Verstappen at turn 11, but went off track with all 4 wheels, so he had to give back the position, which he did at turn 17. After a few laps, Norris finally got the job done. Max Verstappen had his fun and the gap to Piastri had grown over 8 seconds for Norris. Then it was time for the pit stops. Kimi Antonelli was called in to try and undercut Verstappen, but his pit stop was slow. Red Bull called Max in, and this time it went without incidents. It was a decent pit stop and no unsafe release like a day earlier in the sprint race. Just wanted to mention that too. Not long after the pit stops, the Miami safety car struck again. This time a virtual safety car because of Behrman's Haas blowing flames from his ass. But it allowed George Russell to do a pit stop in half the time it would normally cost. And he came out 20 seconds ahead of Verstappen. The Dutch champion couldn't close that gap and he finished 4th. Lando Norris had good pace all race long, but couldn't close the 8-second gap he had to Piastri. I believe he was stuck at 3 seconds when the flag fell for the finish. All in all, a pretty entertaining race thanks to the defense Max Verstappen put up against the 2 papaya cars. A lot of other drivers wouldn't bother, but Max is built differently. Time for Oscar Piastri to do the gritty and for Lando Norris to lick his wounds. He was definitely sore about how the race went, and as always, he said some stupid stuff in the interviews after the race. What did he say? The interviews after the race with the podium sitters were done by the legendary Jensen Button, who asked if it was perhaps too inviting to try and pass Max Verstappen around the outside of turn 2. Lando said, "What can I say? If I don't go for it, people complain. If I go for it, people complain. So you can't win. But it's the way it is with Max, you know? It's crash or don't pass, unless you get it really right and put him in the perfect position. Then you can just about get there. But I paid the price today for not doing a good enough job, but I'm still happy with 2nd. I have thoughts about what he said about crashing with Max Verstappen, but I'll save that for later. There's quite a bit more he said in the press conference a little later. He was asked about the incident with Verstappen and he said, "No, it was fine. I mean, he's fighting hard, but it's up to him to do that." Okay, well, that's alright then, no? Yeah? Not really, because he followed it up with this. You know, he ruined his own race. He's not racing very smart. He probably could have finished 3rd today, and he didn't because of that. So yeah, he's fighting hard, as always expected, but that's the way it is. Alrighty then. it's Max Verstappen who isn't racing very smart. Interesting. And then the weird awkward interview with Rachel Brooks, where he's smiling but you know he isn't happy, and his answers are sarcastic with an angry undertone. Not nice at all. Saying things like, it's Max, he can do whatever he wants. And when Brooks pushed him about what he said, asking him if he meant it, he looked away and said, no, I'm just saying it for the interview. What the fuck, Lando? Even I can't defend you when you behave like that. I recorded a podcast not long ago with 2 other F1 creators, and the topic was Piastri versus Norris. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. As it's easier to defend Piastri, I sort of took sides with the Norris side and highlighted his qualities. I can't do that after races like this and then saying stuff he says. It's no wonder there's a bit of Norris hate going round. The comments on Twitter were exactly like you expect. Not good. The incident that saw Norris drop to P6 was looked at by race control, and they said no further action was needed. That means that Lando's attempt just wasn't good enough, and he can only blame himself for that. And I get it. He's seen Piastri do a big move on Verstappen in Jeddah and a big move in the sprint race in Miami on Antonelli, so he probably felt he needed to go for it. What he didn't calculate is how small the margins are in situations like that. Piastri could have timed his moves in previous races a fraction later and he'd have been penalised twice. Piastri is very firm and determined, and that will only get worse now that his lead is bigger. But it's still very tight. In this case, Lando should have waited and lined up a better opportunity. He would have won the race if he had, as his race pace was the best on the grid. Then the pass or crash comment. That's something from the days when Verstappen was fighting Hamilton, and that got repeated by the British media and Mercedes all the time to get Max more penalties. Verstappen has never stuck a wheel in to cause a crash, and he's just always on the limit, and that scares Norris. I think it's pathetic to try and influence opinions again with that old trope. I also don't see the media following up on his cue, which is good. Now we get to the not racing smart bit. I think this is pretty rich coming from a guy who needs to be coached on track all the time when he's in a fight. We've been racing in Jeddah since 2021 and the DRS games have been played over and over again. Still, Norris overtook Hamilton twice in a place where he'd be overtaken again, until they told him how to do it. In Austria in turn 4 in 2024, he tried 3 weird, desperate attempts to get past, and in the 4th attempt they made contact. Was that smart racing? Lando Norris has made so many silly decisions that cost him positions, I don't even want to mention them all, because the video would be too long. Max can do whatever he wants. What the hell does that mean? Verstappen gets scrutinized by the media and the F1 fandom more than anyone else. The stewards make an example out of him all the time too. Max Verstappen does what he wants and then faces the consequences. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. That's racing. Just like unlucky safety cars. So yeah, I'm very disappointed in Norris here. And then to think that Max Verstappen calls him a friend. The reaction. First, let's talk about the reaction of Max Verstappen, who seemed unbothered by it all. He said he wasn't frustrated by finishing P4 instead of P3. He said that he was there to win and that they were miles behind the pace of McLaren, so he had a little fun out there. The safety car was just unlucky. He also mentioned that the McLarens had very little thermal degradation, but not in an accusing way. So that's the reaction from Verstappen. Very based, balanced and rounded, like a grown-up with a kid. The reactions on social media were not so rounded. All the Norris haters had an opportunity again to vent their anger, and the LN4 girlies were crying their wee eyes out, not understanding where all this is coming from. I suppose they don't watch the race. The media were very fair in their assessments, although I felt they coddled Norris quite a bit. I bet if it were Charles Leclerc in a title fight like this, losing wins, they'd be a lot harsher. Lando Norris, who's chasing his teammate now, has lost ground yet again. He couldn't blame bad qualifying this time. This time it was just poor judgment and lack of racecraft. Now, I'm not entitled to say these things as I'm not a driver. The only one who should say these things is Max Verstappen, who keeps catching strays from his friend. But Max said nothing. He's a better man than I am and most of them out there. That's for sure. Subscribe. Take care now. Doei doei.